Welcome back. This is part 2 of 2, where we will continue to talk about Hungary. So let's begin. Tokaj was once called the Wine of Kings and the King of Wines by King Louis XV. Its reputation has long been one of the greatest wines in the world, enjoyed by the highest of nobilities. The Tokaj region has hot summers, cold winters, and long sunny, foggy falls with volcanic soil. For mint, Hszl, Muscat, and Kabar are the main grapes grown in the area. Tokaj is the most famous wine region in Hungary, and its most prized product, Tokaj Hszl, is the first wine in the world to be made with botrytis and to be classified into 3 tiers according to quality, 155 years before Bordeaux. Mountokai is the prominent volcanic cone at the southernmost tip of the region, moderating the area, and the rivers Tiza and Bodrog heavily influence the humidity and therefore the occurrence of botrytis. As the region borders Slovakia, a small percentage of plantings can be found across the border. To make Tokaj, grapes must be picked individually and placed in small 55 pounds or 25 kilo tubs called putonyos, and there are 6 permitted grapes. For mint, which accounts for 60% of plantings, is high in acid with tree fruit flavors. Hszl is the second most planted at 30% of plantings, adding floral notes to the wine. The other 10% are split between Sárga Muscatali, which is Muscat Blanc à Petit Grain in Hungarian, Zeta, Koversolo, and Kabar. Tokaj is also home to wines made with conventional fermentation. Dry and semi-dry wines are matured briefly, fermented dry, though they may contain some residual sugar, and most commonly in stainless steel tanks. Matured dry wines are made with grapes that come from higher altitude vineyards to avoid botrytis, often from single vineyards, expensive and customarily aged in and sometimes fermented in barrels. Samorodny, which means as it comes, can be compared to Beerenauslese ripeness level. These wines are made in vintages when botrytis did not sufficiently affect the grapes to make Hszl. So the grapes, partially affected by botrytis, can be vinified dry, Szaras, or sweet, Édes. When made as Szaras, the wines are encouraged to develop a yeast film like Fino Sherry and Vin in Jura. Fobor is a rare reductive wine, once a common practice but now very rare, is very similar to Samorodny in that it can be made dry or sweet, but without the oxidative aspect. Finally, late harvest wine, Keszoi Sudet, is a new style created to mitigate the cost of Hszl production. These wines are reductive in style and released 12 to 16 months after harvest. Hszl is the classic sweet wine of Tokaj. Historically, botrytis-affected grapes were hand-picked into putonyos and pressed into a paste. The grapes unaffected by the fungus were picked separately and made into a base wine. The Hszl paste was then added to the base wine in measurement of putonyos, where 6 is the highest and sweetest. While the sweetness measurements have changed to residual sugar in the wine, the term putonyos is still in vigor and have specific residual sugar minimums. In 2014, the minimum requirements for Hszl wines were eliminated and levels 1 through 4 no longer exist, making it 5 putonyos the lowest amount of residual sugar for Tokaj Hszl. Wines must age for a minimum of 18 months in barrel and be released after January 1st of the 3rd year after harvest, with most producers holding the wines for 5 to 7 years before being released in the traditional 500 milliliter bottles. With the new regulations, 3 putonyos must have a minimum of 60 grams per liter of residual sugar, 4 putonyos a minimum of 90 grams per liter, 5 putonyos a minimum of 120 grams per liter, and 6 putonyos clocks in at 150 grams per liter and up. Putonyos are no longer part of the Hungarian wine law, but as these wines can age for a very long time, you could find bottles with the older labels in the market. The higher the putonyos is, the higher concentration, sweetness, richness, intensity, and complexity are. Essentia, or nectar, is a botrytis-affected sweet wine made from the free-run juice produced in very good vintages with a minimum of 450 grams per liter residual sugar. Alcohol levels are between 4 and 6%, and a particular yeast is required due to the high sugar content, requiring fermentation to last several years. Tokaj Essentia generally goes through 10 years of barrel aging, and is rarely sold commercially, often used for blending to improve the concentration of Açu wines. Two other wines produced in Tokaj are Varieties and MacNeil. Varieties, much like Ripasso della Valpolicella, can be produced by fermenting wine or must poured on Tokaj Açu paste after pressing the sweet wines and having a minimum residual sugar of 45 grams per liter, but often over 60 grams per liter. MacNeil, a rare wine made by fermenting new wine or must poured on Tokaj Açu lees, has typically 50 to 90 grams per liter residual sugar, but is no longer a category. Hungary in general has a continental climate with cold winters and hot summers, with a warm south and cool north. Its prolonged sunny autumns are a great promoter for botrytis. The average growing season temperature is 60 Fahrenheit and annual rainfall of 24 inches. In both aspects, Hungary is much similar to Alsace. White grapes dominate Hungarian wine production, but many indigenous varieties were abandoned after phylloxera. Hungarian wines are predominantly labeled varietally. The most important grapes are Kadarka, Kekfrancos, which is Blaufränkisch, Portugieser, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Zweigelt for reds, and Furmint, Hszl, Esero, Leanica, Kirai Leanica, Kekineanu, Ufark, and Surkebarat, which is Pinot Gris for whites. Furmint is one of the 6 grapes allowed to be used under the appellation of Tokaj, and it is the main grape for Açu wines along with Hszl. It is characterized by being an early budding, late ripening fruit with good drought resistance. Hszl is the other main grape variety in Tokaj besides Furmint. However, it is widely planted all over the country. It can be found even in the southern Villani. It is late to ripen like Furmint, but with looser bunches, allowing for good ventilation through the grapes, making it less prone to rot than Furmint. Esero is almost totally restricted to one wine region, Mor. It is high-yielding, early ripening, and susceptible to botrytis and sensitive to low winter temperatures. Once it was the most planted variety in Hungary, but it is now limited to Kunság, Mor, and Nesmeli. Surkebarat, Hungarian for Pinot Gris, is grown on more than 1,500 hectares, mostly in Matra wine region and around Lake Balaton. On the north of the lake, there are beautiful wines made of Surkebarat, grown on volcanic soils. Kadarka is grown almost all over the country. It has significant vineyards in the Great Hungarian Plain, where Kunság, Csongrád, and Ajos-Baja wine regions are situated. Kadarka is most important in Szexárd and Eger, the 2 wine regions where the famous blend Bikaver, Bull's Blood, is made. And Kadarka is usually one component of the blend. Total plantings of Kadarka accounts for less than 700 hectares. It is late budding and ripening with good drought resistance, productive and best suited for loess and sand. There are over 8,000 hectares planted to Kekfrancos. It is the most widely planted red grape of Hungary, grown in most of the Hungarian wine regions, probably the most famous in Sopron, neighboring Austria, and in the 2 Bikaver producing regions, Eger and Szexárd. In Villani, Kekfrancos is also cultivated with great care and believed to have great potential. South Balaton, Kunság, and Ajos-Baja also produce significant amount and quality. The country joined the EU nomenclature in 2009, and its system resembles closely the system in Italy, with the lower tiers as wine, or bor in Hungarian. The next tier up is PGI, or OFJ in Hungarian. The top tier is PDO, and it is split into 2 grades, OEM at the bottom and DHC at the top. There are 31 PDOs and 6 PGIs. The Districtus Hungaricus Controllatus, or DHC, is very similar to Austria's DAC and is a voluntary subcategory within the PDO. If a subregion of a PDO wants to be awarded a DHC status, it must apply with the HNT, which is the National Regulatory Office, with specific viticultural and enological rules that wineries must follow. The DHC status in relation to the OEM status can be understood as the Italian DOCG in relation to DOC. There are currently 7 DHC regions. Here are some major producers who may be able to find in international markets. Oremus in Tokaj, owned by the Alvarez family, producer of Vega Sicilia. Royal Tokaj Wine Company, founded in 1990 and partially owned by Hugh Johnson. Chateau Paisoche in Tokaj, owned by the Laborde family, producers of Chateau Clinet. And Tusko Birtok in Sexard, owned by the Antinori family. How about you? Have you ever visited Hungary? What is your favorite Hungarian wine? I'd love to keep this conversation going, so leave your comment below and I'll be glad to see what you have to share. I know this was a long presentation, part 2 of 2, so I thank you for sticking around and I hope it was useful to you in any way. If you would like to see more of these presentations, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow me on Instagram. I'm hoping to publish one video every week, so stay tuned for more content.